Hello and welcome back to Jack Knives Reviews. I am, of course, your host, Jack Knives. Today I will be reviewing The Batman. 2 years after Batman first arrived on the scene, Gotham City is overrun by a new villain known as the Riddler, who has murdered multiple people, leaving ciphers and clues that could link Batman, Bruce Wayne, and several others in the crime syndicate of Gotham to its deep-seated underbelly, and hopefully give answers as to what is going on and who can stop the Riddler. Wow. I mean, as you could obviously tell, I am a huge Batman fan. And this is probably the most anticipated movie I have waited for since the pandemic. Matt Reeves has always been a peculiar director. Some of his works are kind of hit and miss, but listening to him on the DC Fandom when they had the virtual panel, I could hear, listening to it, this man is a fan, an actual fan of Batman. Not like Nolan, who said he's a fan, but he kind of just cursory glossed over Batman and kind of nitpicked different scenes and put him in the movie. No. This is Batman. This is so hard for me to talk about without spoiling anything, but suffice it to say, anyone who thinks Robert Pattinson was going to be a terrible Batman, you're wrong. You're just wrong. In my opinion, this did for Batman what Joaquin Phoenix and Heath Ledger did for the Joker. Yes, it is that good. The concept of the movie is so dark and grimy and gritty and just visceral. And it really did touch on aspects of Batman that they never really do in the films, namely his detective skills. They never really delve too much into his detective abilities or his ability to solve crimes, which is a huge part of what Batman is. The inexperience of it wasn't forced. In fact, Nolan's Batman was less experienced than this Batman. According to Matt Reeves, this Bruce Wayne was inspired by Kurt Cobain. And you could see a lot of elements of that, what he's talking about. It doesn't make sense unless you see the movie, but it does. Zoe Kravitz played Selina Kyle, and she, for the most part, probably did the most accurate portrayal of Catwoman as far as like comic to screen. But in my opinion, and in a lot of people's opinion, no one will ever be as good as Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman because she did her own thing. But as far as accuracy, yeah, Zoe Kravitz hit it out of the park. She literally got it down exactly how that character is. Paul Dano did an interesting take on Riddler. Not a bad one, but it was simultaneously exactly what I was expecting and nothing like I was expecting at the same time. They kind of portray him more like the Zodiac Killer, where he's more using ciphers and murdering people in really interesting strategic ways. I'm not gonna lie, there was personally 1 or 2 points where I was thrown through a loop, and there was a couple twists and turns that I didn't see coming. Jeffrey Wright played Officer Gordon, and I liked his portrayal of Gordon because I think only the Nolan one has Commissioner Gordon really been portrayed as working in tangent with Batman really closely. But this one, you could tell they treat each other as equals, which is good, and it's interesting to see that. Colin Farrell, wow, his Penguin was like, yeah, this is pretty spot on to the comics. I still think the best depiction is from the Arkham games, but that's more personal preference. I love the design of the Batmobile as well as just the overall design of Batman's outfit. It's simultaneously very homemade, but far more tech advanced than the average at-home Batman would be able to make. So it had a good balance of high-tech and low-tech appeal at the same time. One aspect of this movie that I think a lot of people may not really perceive unless you're really into the character as I am. There's always been this concept within the DC universe of the trinity of Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman representing the hope of the DC universe, representing heroism in a way that I personally I don't really see very often in Marvel as far as in movies, but in the comics they do it really well. The concept of heroism isn't I'm going to go beat up a supervillain. The concept of heroism isn't look how cool I am, look how cool my suit is, look at my powers. It's ultimately down to what you do for the people. And one of the reasons I'm such a big DC fan opposed to Marvel is that DC understand the concept of heroes rather than saviors. There's a difference. Heroes, it's more like they take on the seemingly impossible task of fighting for people, whereas saviors are doing it more for glory, in the sense of like the Marvel universe, where it's more about the ego of look how cool I am, look how awesome I am. Superman is a perfect example. This guy's a living god and he just does it because he cares about people. Wonder Woman, same thing. This is the first real large scale version of Batman to display that. Not since Dark Knight Rises, but I think it's better done here. One of the other things I did love about this movie was the world building. The world building of this franchise. I hope it becomes a consistent franchise because I would love to see more in it. And yes, they kind of hinted at a sequel, but it's also left in a way that is not super black and white, it's gonna happen. To be honest, the only real major downside is for some people, the time of the movie can seem very long. But having sat through it and watched it, I didn't feel like it was as long as it actually was. Because that has to do with the writing, the pacing, the directing, the cinematography, and the overall script keeping me that engaged. It's kind of similar to how when you watch the Lord of the Rings movies, you don't really realize how long they are until you sit down and watch them because you're so engaged in them. And I felt a lot like that. I give The Batman my highest score of 5 out of 5. This is probably my second favorite Batman movie I've ever seen. I mean, with the exception of The Joker, because I don't really consider that a Batman movie. It's its own thing. But, I mean, the 89 Batman will always hold a place in my heart, but it used to be Batman then The Dark Knight. I have to bump this higher than The Dark Knight. And I never thought I'd say that. But here we are. Have you seen The Batman? Let me know what you thought in the comments down below. As always, I'll see you next time.